Okay.
I said, remember to record.
Right. Okay.
Where does one access all of these recordings you've made?
If you look on one of the pages, it says all recordings. It's a YouTube channel that we have. They should be up there. Most of them should be up there. I think that's what I was told that they did. So I'll double check. I'll let you know. But there's a YouTube channel. You can run through them. I think as they come through, they put them on, and they're on this, on this site, on YouTube, old Moshe channel. I'll find for you and I'll forward it. Okay, we're now officially 8 o'clock and 35 seconds. Okay, so we've been talking the last few days about Avos Yisrael and Avos Abrius and the effect of how much the heart of the Jewish people, the heart of the world, is what creates the goodwill that hopefully will bring the world to a better place. I want to talk a little more practically today because, it's still, I often, when it's, I didn't realize how many weeks we've been doing this. It's quite a long time. And I sometimes have, like they say in the expression Yiddish, a drosh and baich. We pass by on Shabbos. I don't have the opportunity to speak, not yet. Hopefully we'll get there. But the things that come up and things that I want to share. So I have a remnant from this week's Parashas Kairach that I think is very relevant and something that I think we'll all relate to. And you don't have to admit to it, but I'm telling you, I know that we all relate to it. And I'm going to share it with you. Now, the basic concept is a concept that's expressed in among therapists in couples, but it's not really about couples, as I'll prove to you. It has to do with relationships in general. But most often, the application of it and the scenario where these things erupt are very often in the close relationship with the husband and wife. But even those who don't have to deal with that, who don't argue with their wives or don't get into any conflict, but the same concepts are prevalent in any relationship. So I want to share with you something that's based on a principle of a kippah-clad therapist. His name is John Gottman. I don't know if he's from. I once sent him my theory, which I'll share with you what I'm going to say, based on something he taught. There's something called the Gottman therapy about an approach to marriage counseling and relationships. And there's a principle that's known as, you have to know a little Christian literature about this. I really don't know about it. I only know about it because when I read about it, they made a reference to the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, which some literature and Christian literature about 4 horsemen and different colored horses that come and herald the end of the world. So he used this about the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. He's been studying marriages for decades. And he says there are four problems that when he interviews couples, if they can't conquer these 4 problems, then the marriage is an apocalypse. There's no hope for the marriage. And I want to share with you what he says. We'll go through them. We have time. And you'll do your own homework, and you could share this. I don't know if your wives are listening, but it would probably be helpful if they were, because they could probably help us understand it better. But so I'm going to share with you, and Yishma Chacham v'Yosefayid, and then I'm going to tell you where I think this idea that he presents, I think it's sourced in the Torah without a doubt, and you'll tell me if I'm right. So he says that there are 4 problems that arise in a relationship that he can predict that this relationship is flawed and it's fatalistic and it won't last. And these are the 4 things. No more, he says, when one part of the couple, or both, very often it becomes it scales upward, everyone goes tit for tat. Criticism, the verbally attacking a personality or character. And he says that's number 1 on the list. One of the most difficult aspects in a relationship to overcome is when the couple get in trouble by criticizing rather than complaining. There's a big difference between complaining and criticizing. And he gives an example. He says, very often a husband, we'll use the husband because most often we are the bad guys. The husband is late and he didn't tell his wife that he's coming home late. Meanwhile, she's waiting. Who knows what she's expecting? She needs him, or she had expected him. So she says to him when she comes in the door, she says, you never think about how your behavior is affecting other people. I don't believe you are that forgetful. You're just selfish. So she criticizes, you're selfish. Doesn't say you're forgetful, you're selfish. You never think of others, you never think of me. That's criticism. That's number one. Number one poison pill is criticism. When you criticize, we'll soon get to how to say that in the right way. We're going to go step by step. So the first thing is criticism. When you criticize and you point to a flaw and you sort of demean the person by criticizing them, a flaw that they have, you point out a flaw. That's number one. Then it usually gets worse than that, because then it comes to contempt. Contempt is attacking a person's total sense of self. In other words, you can criticize someone about a flaw, but contempt means like disdain and degrading, like, the mamish worthless. Contempt is when there's a sense of mockery and hatred. So another example, when, a husband comes home and he sees the wife comes home, the husband comes home, and the husband plunks down on the couch, and the wife is going to be guilty. She turns to the husband, she says, "You're tired? Cry me a river. I've been with the kids all day, running around like a mad to keep this house going. And all you do when you come home from work is flop down on that sofa like a child and play those idiotic video games. I don't have any time to deal with another kid. Could you be any more pathetic?" So this is not just a criticism. This is contempt. That's you're really demeaning and contempt is like, ugh. That says when you get to that and you start using that kind of language, you're really heading towards the apocalypse, as he calls it. Then the next step is when not only are you critical, not only are you contemptuous, but you become defensive. Like you turn the tables, where you make yourself out to the victim. And here he gives an example. He says the husband comes home and he says to his wife, he said, "Did you call Betty and Ralph to let them know that we're not coming tonight, as you promised this morning?" And her response is, "I was too darn busy today. As a matter of fact, you know just how busy my schedule was. Why didn't you just do it?" So turn it all around. The person missed what they were supposed to do, and turns it around completely the other way and says, "You should have done it. You don't understand. You don't appreciate me. You make, I'm helpless. I'm make myself into the victim." And obviously, it's understandable that a person wants to defend themselves when you're stressed and feeling attacked, but it only creates a bigger barrier. The barrier keeps growing between the couple, and it becomes at a point insurmountable. And finally, the last flaw that dooms a marriage is when they get into beyond contempt. It is just stonewalling. He says, "You stop. You say that's it." He says, you just shut down, and rather than confronting the issues with the partner, you say, "It's hopeless. I'm not interested in talking about this." You just walk away. That's really rejection. Stonewalling is a total sense of rejection. The person just feels totally, and that's almost insurmountable at this. When you have these four, you're flawed. We're going to come back to a second. I'm going to come back to it, but I want to first show you where I think this is apparent in a Parashat Chumash. And it's almost it's not like screams out from the pasuk if you think about it. By the story of Kairach, so there was two nudniks that appear every so often. Where's Waldo? They keep, only they suddenly killed Dosan Aviram. They've been there, at Mitzrayim. They've been there at Kriyas Yamsuf. Time and again, Dosan Aviram, they're interfering with Moshe. And they weren't really such bad guys. I mean, we're told that they were the taskmasters that took it on the chin and, took the blows to save their fellow Jews. They were people who were attuned to others, but they had a certain resentment to Moshe Rabbeinu. Now, Moshe Rabbeinu at the time of the Adas Kairach, so it was Kairach, then the Dosan Aviram, who were also mixed into it. And Moshe Rabbeinu makes one attempt to woo them back. He didn't give up. After everything he's been through with them, he doesn't give up. And he says, "Vayishlach Moshe likle Dosan Aviram." He probably sent a nice, warm, basket of fruit. Says, "Please come, I want to talk to you." And the first word they say, which again is going backwards, "Lo nala," we're not going up, stonewall. But then they couldn't hold back, and they felt they had to say something. So at first they're stonewalling, then they realize, we gotta throw a few jabs. So the first thing they say is like this. They say, "Hamat ki elisonu me'eretz zovas chol dvar shel hamisenu b'midbar ki tistarer aleinu gam nistarer." You are just looking to rule over us. You're just looking to assert your power. You're an abusive authority figure. Ki sistar aleinu gam nistarer. So the first thing is they criticize Moshe. You're a bully. Ki sistar aleinu gam nistarer. So they first criticize him. After criticizing him, but they say the criticism is couched in contempt. Where's contempt? So first of all, the pasuk says they start off with a phrase. What's the phrase that they use? They say to Moshe, "Hama'at ki helisonu me'eretz zovas chol dvash." Is it small in your eyes that you've taken us in chol dvash to kill us in the midbar? Ki tisarer aleinu gam nistarer. Why the word hama'at? Where did they get that word from? If you look back in the Parsha, you remember that's what Moshe Rabbeinu used to talk to Kairach. He said the same word, hamat mikem. Is it small in your eyes, the job that Hashem had entrusted you with? That you're special and you're there to serve the Bnei Yisrael. Hama'at mikem. Contempt is when you mock someone, and they use the exact same phrase that Moshe Rabbeinu used in appealing to Kairach. Hama'at mikem. Is it small in your eyes, the great role that Hashem give you? And they mock Moshe, and they contemptuously say, "Ho hama'at," quote unquote, mikem ki alisanu, and more than that. Look what they say. Moshe Rabbeinu has been promising them eretz zovas chol dvash, which is a promise. And what do they say? They derisive. They say, "Oh, ki alisanu me'eretz zovas chol dvash." You took us out of Mitzrayim. You took us eretz zovas dvash, some eretz chol dvash. So this contempt and derision and mockery throughout everything that they say. The pasuk goes, the Torah elaborates on this because the Torah wants us to learn and read the pasuk and learn the Gottman principle. And because you see right here, first of all, you see criticism, point being, and then he says, hama'at, hama'at, you're giving us Musa, we'll give you a little Musa. And then, we came from Eretz Chol, you didn't take us to the promised land. And then again, what do they conclude with? The final conclusion, the same two words they started off with, is what they said. And they say more than that, but we didn't get to the third one. What's the third one? We didn't get to that. So he says, and then he says, and then they say something really strange. If the eyes of those people, meaning referring to themselves, if you poke at our eyes, we're not going up. What is this idea? What a strange phrase. Even if you threaten to kill us, we're not coming to you. That's what they should have said. What do you mean if you're going to poke our eyes out? What is the idea of poking our eyes? What does that mean? It's a strange way to say, even if you poke our eyes out. Even if you put stoke us with a skewer through our body. I mean, poke our eyes out. What does that mean? So it seems in ancient times, and there's several stories in history was like that. They used to show submission, to show that someone's their eved, they'll poke out their eyes. That was a symbol of and it's true. It says when Shimshon was taken captive by the Plishtim, his eyes were gouged out. Tzidkiyahu, he was the last king of Yehuda. Nebuchadnezzar removes his eyes. And Nachash, the ruler of Ammon, Yavesh, who wants to make a pact with him, and he makes a condition on each one of them to put the right eye out. And Hurdus also, he forces Bava and Buddha, the Gemara says, to blind himself. Blinding a person was a sign of submission. You're now in my control. So they used a metaphor, which was common in those days, and they turn themselves into the victim. It says, you just want to make us be submissive to you. They portray themselves as the innocent victims who are just being abused and their eyes being pointed out, being diminished into being valueless, and make yourself living. So that's the defensiveness we spoke about. And finally, again, they last with the last two words. They reiterate the stonewalling because they started with Leinala and they end up with Leinala. It's mamish exactly, and I think that's what the Torah was trying to show us that that we have to examine the manner in which we relate to others. So often, and very often, the closer you are to a person, the more there's friction, because there's more eggshells to walk on, because everyone feels, the other one is imposing and taking advantage, and then it escalates into criticism, then contempt, then defensiveness, And even though when they're really the guilty party, suddenly they make themselves a victim, and then there's stonewalling. And when you have those four, there's no hope. So I think that's something. So I just want you, go through he goes through, and this I don't have proof at the end, but it's obvious. What's the antidote to all these? So he says, let's take a case, criticism, another case of criticism. A husband comes home and he's talking about his day. Meanwhile, the wife went through a whole difficult day. And she says to him, you always talk about yourself. Why are you always so selfish? You're just telling me about your day. What about me? Where do I fit in? So the first thing she says to him, he says, you're selfish. She criticizes him. How would you say it in the right way? So you have to put yourself into it. You have to, say, look, I'm feeling left out of our talk tonight and I need to vent. Can we please talk about my day? It's about, reiterating who you are and not criticizing the other person and realize the person maybe didn't realize. And instead of criticizing, accentuate the positive and put yourself forward and your needs. There's no blame or criticism. It's just presenting the problem in a way that obviously you're paying. It doesn't mean you're not paying, but you're not criticizing. You're not killing. The minute you shoot someone, then they're already going to start being defensive and start pushing away. But if you don't shoot, you just say, look, I need to vent, and that's one. And another example of contempt, another example, the wife says to the husband, you forgot to load the dishwasher again. Ugh, you are so incredibly lazy. That's contempt. You're just lazy and you roll your eyes and it's over. What could you say? Instead of being contemptuous, first of all, he talks about constantly finding, it has to be a greater balance of appreciation for one another and expression than there is criticism. That's number one. And contempt. But he says like this, he says, you could say the same thing in a different way and create a relationship. I understand that you've been busy lately, but you could please remember to load the dishwasher when I work late. I'd really appreciate it. You could say it where you put it in a whole different context. And although it's not comfortable, but it's friendly and it's working together and it's a relationship, it's rather than, what's going to end up with a wall between us. And then defensiveness, another example, the defensiveness when someone, this happens to all of us, and we can, use, not to blame the husband and wife, either one could fit into this picture. And, they're coming late, they have to go somewhere and have a meeting or a wedding, a simcha, a dinner, and it's taking time for one to get ready. So it's not my fault that we're going to be late. It's your fault since you always get dressed at the last second. That's, defensiveness, and you make yourself the victim and says, I'm always the victim. I always have to suffer. And how do you say that? He says, I don't like being late, but you're right. Take some ownership. Don't be so defensive. Don't think you're self-righteous. Take some responsibility. He says, we don't always have to leave so early. I can be a little more flexible. Just admit. Don't become defensive and suddenly make yourself into the heilige victim when we all have to take ownership of what we do, and it's not always one-sided exactly. And finally, he says, in terms of stonewalling, the classic case would be the husband says, look, we've been through this over and over again. I'm tired of reminding you. Shalom, I'm out of here. And you could say it a little differently. Say, honey, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'm feeling overwhelmed. I need to take a break. Stonewalling doesn't mean you have to immediately have the conversation. Take a break, soothe, go read something, go get a coffee, and take a break. When you find that when you give yourself a little self-nurturing, you don't get as angry as much. It's when you're beaten and you feel like you're beaten down and someone puts a wall between you, then you're ready to fight or flight. Either, it's to run away, stonewall, or to fight. But you don't have to do that. You can take a break, put it into perspective, and then come back and then deal with it in the right way. So I think this is something that is a lesson that we learned from the Pasha Dosan of Aviram. Moshe Rabbeinu exactly touched on all these 4 points that Dosan and Aviram were guilty of, and that's why it was an apocalypse and there was no hope. And that's it. Once they said Leinala, and Moshe Rabbeinu said, sorry, and that was the end, and the earth swallowed them up. May we never be swallowed up from our conflicts. Life is not easy. There's always tension. There's rightful tension, rightfully so, and we have to feel good about ourselves. We have to be able to nurture ourselves, but we also have to learn how to deal with our partners, whether it's in a business or whatever it is that, with spouses or children or just friends, is every circumstance about all relationships. the Torah taught it in relation between Dosan Avir and Moshe Rabbeinu, it wasn't husband and wife. It could be in any case. We often criticize, we're contemptuous, we're defensive, we portray ourselves the victim, and then we just, walk away. That's not the way to creating achdus. That's the way to assuring pirud. This is the lesson for today.